Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. Eleanor Smith headed to the coffee machine to brew herself a double portion of hot, strong savior. A night shift in the emergency room lay ahead, and the habit of sleeping in snatches, for half an hour between calls, had never developed. Was that really rest? Only Chloe, nicknamed Morocco for her irrepressible energy, a nurse with whom the children's ambulance doctor had been through many critical situations, could joke about fatigue. She said that Uncle Reuben could chop her down even while she was moving. Coffee no longer helped, and the energy drinks in bright cans, though they promised vigor, were essentially just chemical nastiness. When a child's life hung by a thread, Chloe knew how to pull herself together instantly. Eleanor Smith was amazed every time. Iron nerves, iron character, a phrase would surface in her memory from a cartoon or a song. To herself, she would add, and a golden heart of enormous size, capable of holding love for the whole world. After each call, Chloe and their driver George would collapse, falling asleep as soon as they touched the pillows on the sofas in the break room. But the senior member of the brigade, Eleanor Smith, always remained vigilant, in full combat readiness. Ellie wrapped the steaming cup in both hands, inhaled the familiar aroma, and thought with pleasure, "When I get home after the shift, there's nothing to cook. There are a couple of cutlets and yesterday's mashed potatoes in the fridge. Mike, my husband, rushed off on a business trip this morning. Freedom for culinary parrots for 3 days." She stretched her legs onto the coffee table, watching her assistant sweetly doze under the monotonous hum of the split system. The summer had been unbearably hot, and the air conditioner worked without a break, as if drawing energy from an unknown source. George was peacefully snoring in his sleep. At the substation, everyone knew he was in love with Chloe, but for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to confess. A strong man nearly 2 meters tall, he had served in hotspots under contract. After being wounded, his shallow wife had left him, unwilling to see a freak with a scar across his cheek by her side. Next to the lively nurse, the seasoned George turned into a timid lamb, stumbling over his words when she spoke to him, breaking out in red blotches from accidental touches. Eleanor Smith smiled, remembering how almost 20 years ago her Mike had circled her with interest. He had approached her in the park on a spring day, where she was cramming Latin for a medical school exam. "May I sit down? Is this spot on the bench free?" Pretty light-haired Ellie flashed her gray-green eyes and moved her thick briefcase filled with textbooks. "Why didn't the other benches catch your eye? There are plenty of spots there." "This bench suits my pants," the strong Mike mumbled awkwardly, blushing. "Then my arguments are exhausted," the girl laughed. "Let's get acquainted, shall we? I see you're unlikely to decide on that yourself." Holding out a hand sweaty with nervousness, the guy mumbled a little fearfully, "Michael, you can just call me Mike." He didn't shake her hand, frantically wiping the moisture on his light summer trousers. Ellie lightly touched his hand with her fingertips and said, "And I'm Eleanor, Ellie for short. Sometimes friends call me Ellybug." The childish nickname instantly diffused the tense atmosphere. Mike smiled happily and said, "I'd like to earn the right to call you Ellybug too, to become your friend. Let's use the informal address." "Let's do it," she replied. "Why be formal at our age?" That day, Ellie had to hurry back to the dormitory to have a clear head for the boring exam the next day. They agreed that Michael would wait for her outside the institute. If the exam went well, they would celebrate with ice cream and pastries at the confectionery on the boulevard. A red light flashed on the ambulance dispatch panel. The dispatcher was typing quickly on the computer, making notes in the logbook. "Brigade for a call. Address Grigoriev. Application sent. Faster. House on the outskirts. Little girl is suffocating. Parents don't understand what happened. Quickly pulling on her uniform, Chloe was already rushing down from the second floor. Eleanor Smith, I've got the case, and I stuffed your file folder in too. No time to waste. I have a feeling this isn't a simple case. Quickly taking their places in the already started vehicle, the well-coordinated trio led by Eleanor Smith set off. The night city was slowly cooling down from the day's heat. To George, it seemed as if the softened asphalt was melting under the wheels of the old Gazelle. But there was no time to think about it. He drove the car carefully and quickly. If the road remained this deserted, they would arrive in about an hour. Eleanor Smith, sitting next to the driver, thought, I should have put Chloe and George in the back. At this hour, while George was driving the car at its limit, in the back compartment, Chloe was lost in gloomy thoughts. She was 30, and her life hadn't been easy, an orphan since the 3rd grade. Her family was a rare case where it wasn't the father who disappeared from home, but the mother. She fell in love with a young chef colleague and followed him to the ends of the earth, and leaving for 5 years as production manager of a new restaurant in Norilsk. Wasn't that the edge of the world? After such an act by his wife, Chloe's father seemed to snap. He methodically searched for and destroyed any images of her. He tore up wedding photos, smashed a bottle of perfume in the bathroom, which broke with a mournful crunch, and he trampled on the shards, as if crushing the remnants of love. Her scent lingered in the bathroom for a long time. Chloe was 10 then. She couldn't understand what was wrong with her if her mother had left her with her father without even saying goodbye. The word love was unfamiliar to her. Her parents were reserved, businesslike. Later, analyzing her childhood, Chloe made a vow to herself. I will elevate my chosen one to the heavens with my devotion. I will not repeat their mistakes. Her father drowned his sorrow in a peculiar way. He didn't drink, but threw himself into work. He was a plumber, a master from God. People queued up for him to install expensive plumbing without a single scratch. No one guessed that his goal was to earn a huge amount of money, fly to Norilsk, and prove to his wife that he was the one you don't leave. In a beautiful tin box from under Halva, he saved banknotes, not spending a single ruble even on beer. The wad grew, becoming heavy in his hands. Meanwhile, the object of his dreams in the north couldn't cope with the harsh realities. The tragedy was banal. Neighbors shook their heads, learning that the restaurant manager had decided to walk a couple of blocks in the strongest blizzard. Chloe's mother got lost in the snowy trap. Snow descended in an icy pack. It sealed her mouth, her nose. She couldn't breathe. Her knees buckled. She sat helplessly in a snowdrift. She had no strength to scream. An hour later, when her husband became worried, a search was organized. The woman was found alive, but she quietly died in the hospital from pneumonia. That's how Chloe became half an orphan. But they found out about this later. The criminal story involving Chloe's father could have been the plot of a detective novel. After his wife's escape, he worked obsessively for a year. He saved a sum that he thought would convince his wife to return. He dressed up, got ready. But there were no flights from the city to Norilsk. He had to go by train to a major airport. His fellow travelers in the compartment seemed nice. They had elite cognac, he had Ossetian pies, lemons, a chocolate bar. They had a heartfelt dinner. He didn't notice how he floated. His thoughts were sluggish. He was relaxed. He started telling his life story. Tears welled up. When they offered to play fool, he didn't suspect he was a gambler. He had held cards in his hands about 10 times. He reacted with enthusiasm to the remark, "We should leave you some money, lucky guy. You'll leave us penniless in no time." Who would refuse to easily replenish their wallet? They bet 10 rubles each. A funny amount, just for the thrill. Paper pictures spun before his eyes. He lost the first 1,000 out of interest. He didn't understand how the sum grew 100-fold in an hour. His head felt like lead. His eyes were heavy. He desperately wanted to sleep. The last thing he heard as he drifted into slumber was, Leka. Then silence and darkness. It seemed he wasn't in the compartment, but swaying in a narrow metal space. A sharp screech, cold wind, wet drops on his face. Flight. Chloe's father's body was found by chance a couple of weeks later in the roadside greenery, between two settlements near the railway. Even mushroom pickers rarely went there. A couple in love had ridden their bicycles into the forest belt. They were attracted by a red rag in the bushes, a sports bag. Then there was a long process of identification and searching for relatives. That's when it was discovered that Chloe's mother was also no longer alive. Where the money went, how the man ended up by the tracks, no one knew. There was a person. He died in vain. Chloe, left with a neighbor while her father was away, ended up in an orphanage. New walls, a new life. She was sociable. Instead of withdrawing, she opened up to her peers and caregivers. In studies and activities, the lively Chloe with light brown hair, caramel-colored brown eyes, and a graceful figure was always at the forefront. Her favorite subjects were biology and chemistry. Her hobby was theater. But even in sports and hiking, you couldn't find a better little nurse. In one outing, a classmate stepped on a rusty nail. A bad wound. The gym teacher and a young caregiver were flustered. The camp with the experienced doctor Martha Peterson was more than a kilometer away. Blood was gushing. For a few seconds, Chloe watched. Then, as everyone later recounted, the fearless girl fashioned a tourniquet from a rope that appeared out of nowhere, shouted to the stunned crowd, "Note the time! A note for me!" She tore her cotton shirt into bandages. She commanded, "First aid kit. What disinfectant is there? Auntie forgot sterile bandages." The recovering gym teacher threw his windbreaker over the girl in just a top. With two students, he built a stretcher from branches. The guy could barely walk. In the orphanage infirmary, Martha Peterson said to Chloe after the ambulance left, "The doctors praised you for qualified first aid, but the ode should be sung to you, not to me, an old crow. I didn't check the first aid kit. A disgrace on my gray head. Where did you learn this, child?" Chloe laughed. "I don't know myself. I love movies about medics, and inside, it's as if someone is sitting and whispering, 'Take this, do that.'" So it happened naturally that Chloe chose medicine not out of necessity, but out of sincere love. The gazelle strained as it climbed the rise and stopped at the house on Pechetnaya Street 10. Eleanor Smith deftly grabbed the case and walked quickly to the gate. Chloe, who had lingered for a couple of seconds, stood behind, covering the rear. There was an old copper doorbell on the gate. A rarity? Probably doesn't work, Ellie thought. But the bell rang out loudly in the pre-dawn silence. Footsteps were heard behind the gate, and it swung open. A silent scene. Spectators could have stood up and applauded. Standing before Eleanor Smith was her husband Michael himself, who had left for a business trip that morning. Seeing his wife, he stammered, "Come in. The girl is in the house, in the far room." Ellie and Chloe rushed towards the house. A thought pounded in Ellie's head. All questions later, only the girl matters now. But what does this mean? Where is Mike here? What connects him to this little girl? The vestibule smelled of dusty rugs. The overall neglect was striking. In the next room, the smells of yesterday's borscht and cinnamon mingled. The little patient lay on the sofa. Next to her, a young woman of exotic appearance was pacing. Seeing her, acid fuchsia dreadlocks, heavily lined eyes, ripped jeans, a shapeless t-shirt, Ellie was flustered. A thought pounded in her head. Mike? What is her Mike doing here? A lover of cleanliness and classics. He can't be here. But he stood nearby, looking at her with the pitiful eyes of a sick dog. Chloe felt the absurdity of the situation and commanded loudly, "Everyone step back. Let the doctor examine the girl. Mommy, quickly tell us what happened and how." The little one lying on the pillow was so much like Mike that Ellie's heart almost stopped. It became clear. Angioedema of the larynx. The girl was barely breathing. On her face, traces of hives. The little one was reaching her hand towards the spots. Surprisingly, Mike took it upon himself to answer. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over Eleanor Smith, and he plunged right in, as if into a whirlpool. My daughter and I were at the circus. There were ponies. She's crazy about horses. In the second act, when the show started, Lily coughed, then her face started swelling. I immediately knew something was wrong. At the first aid station, they gave her an antihistamine. The swelling went down. We went home. Everything was fine. Then Lily started wheezing. I found sawdust from the arena in her hands. It turned out that when she was being ridden during the intermission, she grabbed a handful. She kept smelling it to remember the horse. I think it's a severe allergy. Ellie listened and couldn't believe her ears. My daughter and I went home, Mike said. How was this possible? Circles swam before her eyes. She met Chloe's gaze, and Chloe understood. The doctor was unwell. Eleanor Smith was about to faint. Of course, Chloe knew her boss's husband. She realized that the doctor didn't know about the child on the side. She resolutely seated Ellie on a chair, waved smelling salts. Suspicion of Quincke's edema. We'll get her to the hospital. The doctor nodded resignedly. The condition is serious. We must prevent bronchial spasm. Chloe, prepare adrenaline and prednisolone. They will give us time. After the injection, Lily's face began to pale. Chloe commented, "Sir, don't stand there. Go to the driver, get the stretcher. We're taking her to the hospital. We need to avoid intubation. I wouldn't want to put a tube in such a little one." Eleanor Smith acted automatically. She came to when they were driving in the car with Mike, sitting over the girl. Lily's breathing was intermittent, but it had evened out. Michael didn't take his anxious eyes off the child. And Ellie remembered something else. After that first date when she passed Latin, their relationship developed rapidly. After a week, they couldn't go a day without each other. They were liked by her parents. After the 4th year, they got married, moved into Mike's grandmother's apartment. The lively old woman went to her sister in the village and took up gardening. They lived in perfect harmony. They didn't argue, didn't have disagreements. Complete unanimity. Strong Michael worked as a swimming coach. Ellybug was finishing institute, planning for residency. She couldn't choose a specialization. She joked, "I see myself as an ophthalmologist in a starched coat, and an ENT doctor with instruments looks great too." Fate forced the choice. After defending her diploma, as if on command, "Now you can," Ellie got pregnant. 9 months later, another strong boy was born. Their son Ethan. Their Ethy, their love and joy. He developed on schedule. As the happy father joked, "Time to sit," he sat. "Time to walk," he toddled. Ellie put medicine aside a little, wanting to spend more time with her son, as if intuition told her this carefree time wouldn't last long. Trouble knocked when Ethan was 3. Ellie's mentor, who spoke of her abilities, hinted, another 6 months, and no one would be happy to have her. The profession loves those who don't get distracted and constantly improve. Even before that, upon learning of her pregnancy, Eleanor sharply changed her plans. She decided to become a neonatologist, specializing in infants. She meticulously studied pathologies, spending hours in the pediatric intensive care unit. Then her fervor waned. Ethy took up all her time. To return, Ellie needed to immerse herself in a department where there was a place for a beginner pediatrician. Healthy Ethy went to kindergarten. Mike went to training. Everything went on as usual. A couple of months later, the caregiver asked Ellie to stop by after work. She expressed concerns. First, she asked, "Don't you notice anything strange?" Ellie raised her eyebrows in surprise. "We work a lot. We see Ethy in the evenings. He seems healthy. What alarmed you?" "We were preparing for the morning show. The dances weren't working out. Ethan did a circle, suddenly turned pale, sat down. I didn't pay attention then. But he started stopping more often. I thought his lips were turning blue. Yesterday, the local doctor examined him. She advised a cardiologist. I'm a doctor myself, a pediatrician. I couldn't have missed anything, Ellie retorted sharply. She thought, or could I? Without delay, the next day she took Effie to her department. The verdict was stunning. A rare heart defect, manifesting around 3 or 4 years old. Urgent surgery, otherwise he won't live 6 months. The condition will worsen. It's impossible in this city. There is experience in Moscow. Cardiothoracic surgeons in Germany, Switzerland, and Israel are good. They walked home slowly. She felt like the boy might get sick. Mike rushed over. She pored over textbooks. The outcome was 50-50. Where to find balance? The cost of the operation seemed astronomical. Time flew. They couldn't raise the sum. Even selling Mike's grandmother's apartment and moving into a one-room apartment didn't help. When a charity foundation intervened, things moved forward. The operation and treatment were paid for. Tickets were bought. Things were packed. Ethan died on the operating table. The scales didn't tip in the right direction. There was no negligence, no mistake, no preconditions, except for the illness. Eleanor, as a doctor, understood. But her heart froze when the surgeon came out and spread his hands. Without words, everyone understood. No scream, no sigh, just a tighter embrace in which they stood while their son was being saved. They returned devastated. Ellie kept repeating, "Time is to blame. We missed it while we were raising money. If we had arrived earlier, everything would have been fine." She took retraining courses for emergency medicine. It became important to save at least someone else's child. That's when she told her husband her motto: "We are always responsible for everything. It's just that some people live their whole lives without understanding this." 2 years later, Mike started talking about a second baby. She couldn't explain why. She didn't want to give birth anymore, to have a child. She wanted to devote all her strength to the sick, the suffering, but not to her own children. Mike resigned himself, didn't hint. He was there, painfully dear. And now they were driving next to his daughter from some other girl. Eleanor Smith didn't even want to call her mother in her thoughts. A thought pounded in her head. What does her husband have in common with this feathered wonder? On that June day, when Mike was wandering through the park, it never occurred to him that fate was waiting for him on the bench. A girl with luxurious gray-green eyes, more beautiful than which there were none. Pretty, despite his understanding, she was tracing her lips with a pen, twirling a lock of hair, wrinkling her nose, chewing a sandwich, drinking from a bottle, turning pages, all at once. Mike froze, and, however pathetic it sounds, he was lost. He fell in love at first sight. His legs carried him to the bench. He was flustered, blurted out the first thing that came to mind. She didn't mince words, offered to get acquainted herself, went to the ice cream parlor the next day. In any love story, there are 2 faces, 2 participants. If you were to write down Michael's and Eleanor's memories, there would be 2 similar stories. They understood that they loved each other, wanted to be together. They were close, friendly, understood each other. They lived, waited, raised Ethan. Everything was the same, shared. Together they met trouble. Their son left. They remained. Against the laws of nature, the elders outlived the younger. That trip to Sochi, preparing for the Olympics, was unusual. The games were a year and a half away. Construction was everywhere. The coach and the team tested a new hotel and cafe in Krasnaya Poliana, intended for foreigners. They admired the Caucasus, swam in the sea, won competitions, and were going home happy. When buying tickets, it turned out that many professionals had traveled to Sochi. Tickets were scarce. The coach was forced to buy a ticket in a 2-person compartment. His neighbor turned out to be a girl. She was going to his city on vacation. They had also bought her ticket at the last moment. Pug-nosed, blue-eyed, giggly. Not brilliant with intelligence, talks nonsense. So what? They weren't going to baptize children together. Athletic, Muscular, with serious brown eyes, he had always been attractive to women. But he wasn't interested. He was tied to Ellybug by shared joys and sorrows, like ropes. He paid little attention to others, even if they showed attention. The girl in the compartment was about 10 years younger. When he entered, she was enthusiastically chewing a potato pie, washing it down with cola. She nodded in greeting, introduced herself. Sarah. Going on vacation, I've been painting for 9 months without days off. The foreman gave me 2 weeks. Sit down. Why are you frozen? We'll be stuck together for almost a day. A stunned Michael sat down. The train started. The Sochi station floated past the window. 10 minutes later, the guys barged in, starting to tease. Boss, maybe we should switch places. Such a girl with you, don't disgrace the victory. It was easy with Sarah. She didn't flirt, didn't play games. She treated him to pies, took his sandwich, went for coffee. Some things are meant for women. I'm 23. I look like a shrimp because of my height. But then we'll be respectable. The train glided along the tracks. Day turned into inky night. They discussed premieres, stars, Sochi. They told jokes. The conversation didn't flow. They decided to sleep. Michael was flipping through newspapers. Sarah was rustling a detective novel. Boring. Both lay with their backs to their fellow traveler, pretending to be asleep. Half an hour later, Mike dozed off. He woke up to hands stroking his shoulders. Don't be afraid, brave coach, brutal one. It's hard to resist you. Michael flinched, stood up sharply, turned around. What are you doing? Fellow traveler, I told you I'm married. Or will you only get it from yourself, Mike? Or will you never stray from your wife? Of course, the man grumbled angrily. The hunter's excitement stirred within him. Sarah caught the change. Well, then what happened happened. In the morning, they barely spoke. No, I won't have coffee, thank you. Even the bold Sarah didn't meet his eyes, as if ashamed. They parted ways in their city. The memories of the night were strange. He didn't even consider it cheating. And then something unforeseen happened. In the fall, Michael was closing the locker room when the security guard called out, Mike, there's a girl looking for you. Going downstairs, Mike was surprised to see his fellow traveler. She beckoned him around the corner with a nod, through clenched teeth. I've had partners, but getting pregnant after one night, that's never happened. Listen, coach, abortions are expensive. You'll have to help out. Michael couldn't believe his ears. He could become a father again. He would have given half his life for it. He grabbed Sarah by the elbow, dragged her to the sports field. He seated her on the bleachers, loudly and clearly. You will give birth to this child for me. I will be there, not as your husband, but as his father. Just dare to harm the baby. You'll regret it. Sarah resisted, shouting, Who are you to make me waste my youth on your offspring? Did you find a surrogate mother? I'll be asked to marry later, and I'll have your baggage? They sat down for negotiations again. They discussed the terms. Michael would provide financial support, come at her first request. The child's fate would be decided after birth. She would maintain a healthy lifestyle, not harm the baby. They found out it would be a girl after the ultrasound. Sarah unexpectedly softened. Didn't want a boy, but a girl. I'll think about whether to keep her myself or give her to you, Daddy, as a gift. You were happy, weren't you? Mike looked at her and thought, how could I have been so weak on the train to be with such a woman? He prepared for a conversation with Ellie, wanted to tell her, confess, but kept postponing it. Let the girl be born, then he would definitely confess. Lily was born quickly, healthy. 5 days later, Michael picked Sarah up from the maternity hospital. The feisty painter was quiet, treated the baby carefully. Either maternal instinct, or the girl was pretty, quiet, calm, as if she sensed the wrongness of her appearance. Dad and Mom don't live together, there's no normal family. 3 months later, Michael suggested Sarah formalize the adoption with transfer to him so she could be free. The refusal was sharp. Sarah insisted that he tell his wife nothing. Otherwise, she would cut him off from Lily. At first, Mike was torn. He wanted to involve lawyers, win back his daughter, watched how Sarah treated the girl. There was nothing to fault. A master of her trade, she had even saved a decent sum. He couldn't trap her with money. Time passed. Michael got used to visiting his second home, where Lily greeted him with joyful squeals. They walked, ate lunch like a family. Eleanor was fanatically immersed in work, taking extra shifts. She didn't pay attention to her husband's absences. But when they were together, she was almost the same. Kind, affectionate. The tired gazelle slowed down at the reception area of the children's hospital. Paramedics carried Lily to the examination room. The doctors reassured them her life was not in danger. The brigade's mission was over. Michael stayed with his daughter. Eleanor had to return to the substation. Later that evening, her husband would tell her everything honestly about the events on the train. Ellie would calm down, surprised that she didn't consider his romance a crime. It was as if she felt his hunger for this girl, in whom the dream of a child was embodied. Different fates, different ways heaven helps one find the happiness of fatherhood. After that, everything started to look even funny. Eleanor advised on which doll to buy for discharge, bought sweets, gifts. One day she asked, "Mike, why does Lily's mother look so strange?" Michael explained that Sarah's metamorphosis had happened recently. Neither of them had anticipated what the pink dreadlocks and mannerisms would lead to. Sarah had fallen in love with a new painter. He called himself a free nomadic artist. During breaks, he would paint her portrait, then paint over it. Sarah swooned, got the same dreadlocks. He suggested the shade. The artist didn't ask her out, didn't look into her eyes, didn't give gifts, didn't hint at intimacy. He lured her with a bohemian spirit, charm, sophistication, aristocracy. What wind had brought this genius to their construction site, Sarah didn't ask. She prayed that Mary Poppins in male form wouldn't disappear from the horizon. She imitated her idol. She dressed like him, smoked thin cigarettes, ate like a prince, rolls, wasabi, wine, cheese with mold. She paid less attention to Lily, only pretending to be an ideal mother when Michael was around. He felt no anxiety. By the New Year holidays, Sarah felt that love was about to take flight. The nomad revealed that he never stayed anywhere longer than 2 or 3 months. He got bored. He had dropped out of art school. The urge to change places had won. Sarah rushed after him 2 weeks later. But first, she prepared. She knew that Michael had no secrets from his wife. She invited them both to a cafe to talk. She ordered coffee and pastries to sweeten the pill. She didn't beat around the bush. "I met the man of my life. I'm ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. Lily is superfluous to me. God is my witness. I wasn't always a bad mother. I'm attached in my own way. Now I want to arrange my personal life. If you want, Mike, formalize the documents. I'll give you my daughter and leave." Ellie was in shock. She wasn't against Mike's daughter living with them. But how could a mother abandon her child like that? The image of Effie flashed before her eyes. Her heart ached. "Come back, my dear. I would never have given you away," she said aloud. "We are always responsible for our loved ones. Mike, you haven't said a word yet, but I'm in a hurry. We agree, Sarah, to take your girl. Formalize the documents. We will sign everything." Easily bypassing bureaucracy, Michael and Eleanor adopted Lily in the shortest possible time. The girl adored her father. Her mother's departure was explained as a vital necessity. She quickly found common ground with Auntie Ellie. Crowded but happy. In the small apartment, the voice of a little bell rang out, participating in all activities. Lily and her dad hung laundry, helping Auntie Ellie. The female half-baked pancakes, calling the head of the family for tea. The story could have ended there, but it is not for us to decide how fate will dispose. It prepared new trials. Another brigade was supposed to go to the collapsed house call. The heavenly office decided otherwise. The nurse from the other brigade slipped on the substation steps. The first frosts had arrived, and the ice had been forgotten. Victims were waiting at the collapsed house. The medic's leg was swelling, clearly broken. Eleanor Smith's brigade was urgently reassigned. The collected Chloe, the indispensable George, the focused Ellie. Ready, they could go. Even Chloe didn't argue about riding in the back, quickly getting into the cabin with George. No time to argue. A couple of days ago, Ellie and Chloe had a serious conversation outside of work. They were friends on informal terms, but at work, there was subordination. The doctor started the dialogue, but she wasn't scolding about work, but about George. "Don't you have a heart, Chloe? The substation is buzzing. George is pining for you, and you act like a stranger. You're good, outwardly, inwardly, and a scar adorns a man." "And what do you propose, Ellie Bug? He acts like the devil at any touch. Am I contagious? He touches me and jumps back. How am I supposed to understand that? And you say he's in love. Lies." Now Chloe was riding next to George and involuntarily admired his profile. The scar cutting across his eyebrow and running down to his lips no longer frightened her. George was attractive with a masculine beauty that promised protection. The mystery was, he deliberately avoided her. If he loved her, why like that? George was afraid to approach Chloe within a meter. He loved this giggly girl too much to offend her with a show of interest. And now, when Chloe turned away to the window, he would steal a glance, admiring her understated beauty. When she turned her head, George sat straight, looking at the road. A crowd had gathered in front of the house where a collapse had occurred on the third floor of the old building. It buzzed like 100 bumblebees, filled with rumors from the rescuers, only to buzz again. "Did you hear? A little girl is trapped on the first floor. She's screaming. The rescuers can't get through." Hearing this, the small Eleanor Smith commanded, "Chloe, prepare a syringe with painkiller. I'll try to crawl through." George and Chloe turned around. "You can't, boss. Until the rescuers give the all clear, the house could collapse." "No time for fear," the brave woman replied. "There's a child alone, scared, in pain. What's the point of an ambulance if it's slow?" With the syringe in her hand, Eleanor Smith rushed towards the building where firefighters and emergency services were swarming. "Woman, where are you going?" "I'll crawl to the girl, give her an injection. I'm an ambulance doctor." "The passage is narrow. None of our men could get through." "And I'll try." Debris, plaster, paint, dust. Ellie got on her knees, then crawled, thanking her husband for the training, swimming, jogging. At the end of the crawl space, she saw a little girl pinned down by a metal door. Her legs stuck out towards the exit, as if she had been running. She turned around, shouted, "Two thin people can get through. The girl is pinned by the door. I'm giving her painkiller." "Don't shout!" a whisper was heard. "Loud sounds are dangerous." After a couple of minutes, the little one fell silent. Ellie pushed the door with her shoulder. With difficulty, but the massive object moved. Rustling sounds behind her. The woman whispered, "The girl is relaxed, limp. Pull her by the legs. I'll push the door." Together it went faster. The men pulled the girl through the labyrinth. The return journey didn't seem unknown. Ellie hesitated for a couple of minutes. Outside, people didn't understand what had happened. A crash. The building was collapsing. Two guys jumped out with the girl in their arms. Eleanor Smith was buried under the debris. Calm Chloe screamed hysterically, rushed to George. He hugged her, stroked her head. It seemed as if Ellie Bug had been swallowed by a greedy monster. People were bustling. They talked about the fate of 4 other residents. The widowed brigade stood, embracing. Later, learning they were not needed, they went to the car, their arms still linked. They had to go to Michael to deliver the bitter news. 2 weeks passed. George and Chloe had a new doctor, an elderly pediatrician from the clinic. Silent, stern, but qualified. But the nurse and driver felt that the soul was gone. Everything was as usual, but not quite. They didn't want to go to work. On the day Eleanor Smith died, they rushed to her house. Lily was at kindergarten. Mike was packing a bag for training. Chloe had never seen such a reaction to grief. After their story, blackness spread across Mike's face. His eyes were alive, shining. The light went out, his skin turned ash gray. How to comfort him? All words were empty. Chloe and George understood. They were superfluous in this scorched desert. They didn't want to part. A strong thread bound them, witnesses to the tragedy. They came to Chloe's apartment together after the shift. It seemed no words were needed to explain how much time they had lost. Chloe prepared food, as if she had done it 1,000 times. After the stress, both had a ravenous appetite. A huge pan of potatoes with eggs was devoured in 5 minutes. Before, Gregory thought, if Chloe were near, he would pounce like a wolf. It happened differently. Such tenderness for her, that he would melt like ice cream. He felt such happiness, that there were no long torments of waiting. When Chloe fell into a restless sleep, he couldn't sleep. He checked. She was sleeping on his shoulder. His woman. His dream. He was struck by the warmth with which Chloe touched his scar, kissed the line, looked into his eyes. Did he like the caress? She acted as if a hero, a protector, was beside her. He remembered the disgust on his wife's face when he returned from the hospital. They didn't say a word. I love you. I need you. Everything was said in their story. Now they were proving. It wasn't a mistake. It was worth waiting. In the morning, Chloe said calmly, "George, stop by your place, pick up your things. My apartment is closer to work and more spacious. Then we'll decide what to do with your place. We'll combine, exchange for something bigger." George didn't know quiet family comfort. He and his wife lived in separation. He felt restless, cold, as if they lived apart. He threw himself into work. With Chloe, it was different from the start. Confidence appeared. He was needed, important. Even when he went to the supermarket, she managed to miss him, greeting him warmly, as if he had returned from distant lands. Michael lived as if in a daze after Ellie's death. In the morning, he automatically made sandwiches, coffee, stirred porridge for Lily. The girl became his salvation, his outlet, his light. In his free time, he couldn't stay in the tiny apartment. His and Ellie's parents sharply declined after the grief, turning into helpless old people. They sought solace in working the land. They planted fanatically, finding oblivion. They tried not to think. They didn't take their granddaughter for weekends, and they couldn't handle the lively, curious girl who asked 100 questions. On weekends, Michael took his daughter on hikes. They would go to the river, set up a tent, wander through the steppe, gathering wildflowers for Ellie's grave. They always stopped by the cemetery on the way back. Mike would sit on the bench, talking at length to his departed beloved. He would tell her how the week went, brag about his students' successes. Ellie from the photograph looked with gray-green eyes, smiled that smile with which she loved to declare her motto: "We are responsible for everything. If you commit, go until you win." After the cemetery, Mike felt better for a short time. He noticed a peculiarity. Carefree, laughing women irritated him. He would watch them go, thinking with anger, "Darling, would you step recklessly under the ruins if a stranger's child was crying there?" Annoyance enveloped him. Why were they living and Ellibug was gone? Lily grew up all at once, turning into a little grandma. After kindergarten, she wasn't capricious. Buckwheat porridge with sausages was the best food. Cinderella was a discovery every time. She wasn't afraid to stay alone. After he left, she would ask solicitously, "Are you tired? Shall I turn on the kettle? I'll take your socks?" She had lost a second mother, but she didn't ask, "When is mommy coming back?" They were good in this solitude, understanding each other with half a word. Sometimes in the evenings, George and Chloe would drop by with pastries. They would have noisy tea parties. They remembered Ellie with bright sadness. All four loved her. Everyone missed her. Michael wanted to leave the city where everything reminded him of the past. But where to find a team? And the grave was here, the old folks. The desire didn't align with reality. They decided to celebrate the anniversary of Eleanor Smith's death at a cafe. Colleagues took care of it. Michael, Lily, and the parents were brought to a ready-made celebration. George and Chloe got married. They didn't delay. They were expecting a baby. They moved into a new apartment as they had planned. At the table, many warm words were said about Ellie. They didn't want to leave. Mike's parents wanted to take Lily for a couple of days. They missed her. After seeing off the guests, Mike walked home through the park where they had met. The same bench, the same paths. A group was having fun. 3 guys surrounded a girl, not letting her leave. Michael's eyes darkened. The victim was an exact copy of young Ellie Bug, thin with a mop of hair. She stood helplessly, clutching her purse. The guys grinned, tightening the circle. Mike quickened his pace. "Guys, doesn't it seem like the lady doesn't want to talk?" One loosened his grip, spat out, "Mister, just keep walking. We'll sort things out with our friend here." A cold wave of fury ran through Michael's body. He was becoming a volcano. It was important to save this girl, not let them mock her. Even if they knew each other, even if it wasn't a threat, it was important to rescue her. "Looks like the quick uncle didn't understand. Go another way. We're locals, you're superfluous." Michael glanced at the girl, despair in her green eyes. She was silent, but her gaze pleaded for help. He couldn't be mistaken. She was uncomfortable. "The girl is leaving with me," he issued an ultimatum, "or you'll regret crossing paths." "Look at the funny man." One stepped away, started pacing near Mike. "Doesn't understand the first time. Bold." The guy put his hand in his pocket, took out a knife that flashed steel. "How's that for an argument, Knight? Tickle your throat, or shall we see if our darling likes games?" Mike, who often visited the neighboring martial arts practitioners, wasn't afraid of attacks. It was important that they didn't touch her, the copy of Ellie Bug. The guys abandoned their victim, who froze, didn't run away. They started closing in from all sides. The situation only spurred him on. He had a couple of drinks. The rest was done by hatred for the scumbags who considered themselves masters in their park. How much older was he? 10 years? Not more. Almost the same generation. But in the eyes of his opponents, cruelty, a craving for lawlessness, it was beyond all bounds. The fight started abruptly. The guy with the knife immediately scratched his shoulder. The strongest one smiled, trying to win morally. The girl stood aside, her mouth open in fear. "Get out of here!" Mike shouted. "Be gone in a second!" But the young woman didn't give up. She shook her head energetically. "I won't leave you alone. They've been harassing me for a long time. They caught me alone. We're studying at the university. The boys are from the elite. I'm from an orphanage like a red flag. They're interested in my life. We didn't abandon our own in trouble. I'll be here." Michael was distracted by the monologue, missed a couple of blows to the ribs. Something cracked. A fracture, he thought with annoyance. The guy with the knife decided to have fun differently. He jumped up from behind, pressed the blade to her cheek. "You say, Kitty, you don't abandon your own? What if I tickle your throat now? Will you run away?" The girl, who had been in a state of suspended animation, didn't faint. She turned around, a trickle of blood ran down her cheek. She shouted, "How you annoy me, you little creeps! Nobody without your daddies and mummies. Empty space. What can you do yourselves? Take away your car, your trinkets, your card. What do you know about surviving in a wild pack? No one expected such a rebuff. The guys went wild, their faces darkened. Removing the knife from her throat, the opponent joined his friends. They surrounded Michael with a mass of bodies, faces distorted with malice. He couldn't remember later how he pushed their leader. He did a somersault, fell on his back. His head hit the curb. A ruby spot spread under his head. Mike, who had taken his students to the infirmary so many times, understood. Things were bad. He habitually placed his finger on the side of his neck. No pulse. The rest was a blur. The girl was the first to recover. "Ambulance, police, nobody leave!" The guys nervously pulled out their phones, calling parents, services, acquaintances. Mike sat on the curb, frantically thinking, Lily is at her parents'. I'll be detained. What about her? He quickly beckoned the student over. "What's your name? I need help." "Faith, tell me." "Michael. Here's a note with the address, keys, phone number of friends, George and Chloe. My daughter is with her parents. Pick her up, give her to them. They'll take care of her." When the police, ambulance, and a crowd of people arrived, Michael was calm. Never say never to prison and poverty. It was his turn to taste state bread. Look how many lords had arrived, giving orders. He was lucky they immediately took him to the car. Otherwise, the unleashed dogs of the deceased's father would have dealt with him on the spot. Faith was bustling around Mike, saved by him. She showed the ambulance a cut on her neck to get a certificate. She rattled off to the detectives, the investigator. They were all brought to the police station together. They took his documents, his phone. While they were sorting things out, Faith ran off, made calls. Meeting Mike's gaze, she gave a thumbs up. The mechanism for caring for his daughter had been launched. She turned out to be a desperate firecracker. At the trial, she presented everything in such a way that the rich relatives turned pale. She found witnesses that the trio had been harassing her for a long time. She was respected in her group. These guys were not liked. The picture for the victim was unflattering. Undoubtedly, Michael didn't want to harm the boy. It was a cruel boomerang. But things happened as they happened. He was given 5 years in a general regime colony for exceeding self-defense limits. Faith's participation helped the judge make a decision. The prosecution had insisted on 8 years. Mike didn't know how George and Chloe managed to arrange it with social services, but Lily was given to them for the duration of his sentence. During the investigation, their son Benny was born. The ambulance brigade had connections. They saved the children of officials. When Chloe was allowed a visit, she reassured Mike. "Don't worry. Lily is fine with us. You and Ellie aren't strangers. I'll write to you about her. We'll come for a visit when they allow it. You're in the neighboring region, it's not far. And tell me, what should I do about your tail?" Faith visits Lily, brings toys, asks permission to pick her up from kindergarten, go for a walk, go to the movies. I didn't think the girl would turn out to be such a devoted friend. You met tragically. She defended you so fiercely during the investigation, spoke passionately in court. You never know how a little one will behave in extreme conditions. She's no pushover. My God, Mike, how naive you are about relationships. She fell in love at first sight. Knightly behavior, protector, looks. And you were wrong about the little one. She got into university after technical school. She's 23. The difference is 9 years. She looks young because of her height, her fragility. Her character is fire. Take a closer look. Ellie isn't coming back. You and Lily have a lot of good things ahead of you. You deserve it. The guard leading the prisoner after the visit didn't understand why the strong man was smiling. How could he know that Michael was thinking about possible happiness if this lively girl with green eyes waited for him? Love comes in different forms. Some exchange it for pennies, some remain chosen ones without fear or reproach. It depends on one's luck.